preachers and communities have told and inhabited, and by which they have found their way, from tales of personal experience to brief poems to ancient classics to stories that crack open and find meanings in older stories that have long lain dormant. It offers a provocative anthology of narrative types and helps one rediscover the riches of the past and perhaps even discover a pearl of great price in one's own experience. Wangerin offers here a manual for a preacher's crafting and use of stories, and after a lifetime of preparing and preaching sermons, as well as receiving and carefully observing others' preaching, he also helpfully examines aspects of preaching that books on homiletics seldom discuss. In this book, he invites preachers to examine and understand the weaknesses and strengths of the preaching personas they employ on stage as they proclaim. Dr. Frederick Niedner. Prologue. Preliminary comments. In Performing the Word, Dr. Jana Childers refers to Albert Mehrabian's observation that when people speak face-to-face, they communicate their thoughts by more than 55% of their bodily actions, 39% by their tones of voice, and a mere 7% by the words themselves. This is, of course, an extreme exaggeration, yet it points to the general ways by which we preachers can communicate. Theatrics. Mehrabian's observation is contemporary. St. Augustine preached in the 5th century, now and again performing while he did. It was in those days the custom for a preacher or a teacher to sit in the chancel while the assembled people stood to listen. But Augustine would sometimes stand up and walk among them, touching a shoulder and speaking in fatherly tones. But sometimes he would speak in a scolding tone, rebuking the oblivious, those who were eating their lunches, scattering crumbs on the floor, or others who were chit-chatting, gossiping with their neighbors. He is said to have thundered at these blockheads that they dishonored Christ himself, even as Christ's words were reverberating among them in the church. The bishop's body was visible and expressive, so that the people could experience his sermons. Regarding the way our congregations might come to experience our stories and our sermons, Robert Hughes and Robert Kaiser write, "Theological reflection will be concrete and specific rather than abstract and general. Having spoken of the general, overarching framework for life's experience, we need to recognize that the gospel framework is powerfully known and experienced only as it is enfleshed in concrete and specific language. The listener has to be helped to see the way in which the sermon's message is lived out. The preacher shows the listeners real life in situations in which grace is experienced and shared." In his relatively brief book, The Portal of Beauty, Towards a Theology of Aesthetics, Bruno Forti observes that in the symbols we are given to experience more meaning than can be articulated or understood. New perspectives of thought and life are invoked. The ideal does not absorb the real, but must recognize that the real far surpasses in power, so as to open itself and go beyond itself towards ever wider horizons. Now and again throughout this book, I will tell versions of my own personal experiences. Though there will be a historical core to my memory of the events, the further they recede into the past, the more will I, as others, add unremembered or invented details that nonetheless give voice to the emotions of those past events. This is captured by Brenda Miller and Suzanne Paula, who write, "We continually, often unconsciously, renovate our memories, shaping them into stories that bring coherence out of chaos." Part 1. The Effect of a Told Story.